Hey guys, this is your host Dave Mellon with Valor Fire Training. We're here with the next episode of Q&A with Curtis James Hensley. How's it going, man?
Good. How are you, buddy?
Good. Glad to have you on, man. I just saw you last weekend up in Kearney for the Les Lukert Fire Conference. You
Mhm.
were awesome enough to help us out with our first episode of the Hot Seat. How are you recovering?
Doing well. Really, I think I recovered pretty fast compared to you.
Dude,
So
all right, so I'm not gonna lie. That was probably some. I don't do hot stuff, right? Like that's not my thing. I'm not into like the hot sauce. And I was super afraid of doing that. And then you guys talked me into it. And I mean, it was like sitting around a firehouse kitchen table,
Mhm.
just being peer pressured into doing stuff you don't want to do.
Yep.
And but that was warm. That was real warm.
Really, the one where I noticed like the heat levels just weren't like it wasn't terrible, and then you hit the hot, like the
Right.
sauce was just called hot, and all of a sudden it was like, ooh, that's warm. That's really warm. And then we
Yeah.
went into the mango habanero, which was just like a dumpster fire. It was terrible.
Yeah, that
And
was bad.
then you went from like that to the Carolina Reaper, which I could by that point I couldn't taste the Carolina Reaper. I was already sweating bullets by that point. So, but no,
Yeah.
I we got guys that cook with hot stuff all the time, so you just kind of get used to it at that point. But yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you like Curtis has already heard this story because I told all the guys the next morning, but I woke up at like 3:15 in the morning and I thought I was having a massive coronary. Like I had horrible chest pain. I was like writhing around in the bed and I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm dying." And then I popped a couple Tums and within 15 20 minutes I was fine. I went back to bed and I didn't have any other problems after that. But man, that was ooh. So you're actually the first person that gets to hear this, and everybody listening is going to get to hear this. So we are partnering with a local company called Spice and Foods here in Kansas City, Kansas, and they make like 1,400 different products that range from just to have good flavor to oh my god it's hot, and so hopefully you'll be able to make a trek down here to Kansas City, but we're going to be kind of partnering with them. They're going to be helping sponsor some of our episodes of the hot seat. So
Oh yeah, for sure. That'd be a good time. Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be pretty good. So, um, Curtis, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where generalize kind of where you're at, what you do, what your background is.
So I was born and raised out in the middle of nowhere in northeastern Colorado. So I grew up on a farm or in a town, and we had a farm. And really, if you're heading on I-80 and heading west into Colorado, and you cross right into the border from Nebraska into Colorado, there's a farmstead that sits there, and that's our family farm. So a little town by Julesburg, Colorado, is where I'm from. About a town of 1,100 people. That's where I grew up. Busy doing everything, small town kid stuff, but always watched my dad. He was a volunteer. He kind of got roped into it. We had a city block, like a drugstore, catch on fire. They had an elevator in it, and it took off and started on fire. And his boss at the time was the fire chief, and was like, "Hey, we need manpower." So my dad sprung into action, started helping out, and we lived like 2 blocks from where this was at. So I was 5 at the time. So here my mom and I are sitting on the street corner watching it all go
Just
down.
watching the whole thing go down.
Yeah, and so it was like it was just kind of that niche of hanging out around the station and going to trainings and parades and all that stuff. And so as I got older, it was just kind of like, what am I going to do with my life? Thought about being a doctor, and I was like, man, I like school, but not that much. And a buddy of mine, his dad happened to be a paramedic. He was a flight medic at the time, and so just kind of bouncing ideas off of him, and that's where I figured, well, maybe I'll go in the fire service. So when I was a senior in high school, I was able to go to one of the department meetings and said, hey, I know your requirements are 21, but this is what I'm kind of looking at wanting to do. Maybe go to college for. You think you could drop the age requirement to 18? And so they voted on it, and they're like, shoot, yeah, like let's do it. So I started volunteering when I was 18, and just kind of off and on made my way through, volunteering at some other places when I was in college, and made my way into central Nebraska. Kearney is where I call home. and I work for a department about 95 miles to the west of here. We happen to be a combination department of 39 paid staff, and then we have our assistant chief and chief, and then we've got about 30 volunteers that backfill in and help out when we kind of get overwhelmed or we get a fire call or grass fires, things like that. They get paged in and kind of help out. So, but yeah, that's kind of my story. So I've got 4 kids, and a lovely wife that works her tail off. She's a nurse practitioner in mental health. So she's a psychiatric nurse practitioner, has her
So
own.
she's reading you like a book every day.
Exactly. She does claim that she's yet to find something she can diagnose me with, which I find kind of interesting. I don't know.
I'm going to
Just
go
kind
ahead
of
and say I disagree with that one.
right. But it works out well though. So, but prior to that, she was a flight nurse. And so it's always kind of nice where you get those days where you've had some rough calls or whatever, and she still remembers what that's like. And then you got the psych portion of it. So you can kind of bounce stuff off of her every once in a while, which is always good. So,
That's awesome.
but yeah, man.
So it's really funny, and I actually talked to a lot of people about this. For those of you listening or watching, when people in the Midwest talk about volunteerism being dead, and there being such a struggle with volunteerism, uh, we struggle with it here in Kansas. I run on a volunteer fire department, and we struggle sometimes with recruitment and retention. But when you go to Nebraska, it is like a whole nother animal. Like there are departments with like 80, 90 volunteers. And when I was just teaching at Les Lukert, a lot of the people that were in my leadership class, I'm sitting there asking these chiefs, like, how many people do you have on your department? And they're like, oh, we're all volunteer. We got 75 people on the roster. And I'm like, okay, but how many of those people actually run calls? And they're like, oh, we average, probably like 60, 65, on a big fire. And I'm like, really?
I know.
Seriously? Like, that's a
What do you do
thing.
with those people? I know. Yeah. It is. It's that's the one thing I've noticed living in. So I've lived in Nebraska since 2000, and I started going to college down in McCook is where I went to college at. So it's 2005. And just kind of roundabout way, like I said, made my way to Kearney. But yeah, that's one thing. But it's just kind of, I don't know, the Nebraska way, I guess. If you want for better, just description of putting it together of that. There's a lot of people here that you just got good work ethic, and they want to help out their local community, and it's kind of like in high school, small town school, everybody wants to go out, you get all the boys out for football kind of thing. And
Right.
but anymore now you see it's not just a all boys club. I mean, you've got lots of females that are on that are rocking it and doing the job, and you see them at conferences and stuff. I mean, that was the cool thing I noticed last week in that hands-on portion that I took on Friday with Jake Hoffman and his crew out of Squad 5. That there was quite a few females in there, and they were getting right along with the rest of us, which was cool to see. So
yeah, absolutely. And out in Western Nebraska, I was pleasantly surprised the first time that I taught at Les Lukert, because we met Taylor. She was in the first class that you took with us. And now her and her husband are starting a podcast, and they're moving kind of a little bit further east. But even way out west by the Colorado border, the one department, Imperial, I believe, it was like 2 guys and 4 or 5 girls that they brought with them, who were all on the department. And so, yeah, it's definitely awesome to see that. It's not just the good old boys club, because when you get into volunteer departments, it sometimes can do that.
Right.
So it's really nice to see that it's not. So so you're here for the Q&A, and we actually have this question from Maddy. Maddy is from West Virginia, and she emailed and said, I'm in a smaller combination department, and I find it hard to stay motivated. We don't train as often as I'd like, and the mandatory training is almost always just the basics. I have great leadership, but how can I stay motivated on my own? And when I got this email, I mean, obviously I get a lot of these messages, and it's like, okay, I can totally relate to that 110% on almost every message that I've gotten.
Right.
And so I thought of you specifically just because you and I have had this conversation before about self-motivation, staying motivated when nobody else around you is motivated. And I'm kind of reading in between the lines, but what it sounds like Maddy's saying is They don't train as often as maybe she would like, but they are training, which is good.
Mhm.
And the training is always on the basics. And the one thing that I find a lot of people have an issue with is just training over the basics over and over and over again. And that can be very demotivating. Like it's just,
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
after the 16th time that you're practicing basic ladder skills and you're like, okay, I want to learn how to splice them. I want to learn how to, do all this cool advanced stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and so by her saying like I have great leadership, obviously one of two options: either she's saying it because she feels obligated to say it,
Right.
which we've all been there. We've all had to be like, well, it's the obligatory. I like my management. You and I are probably the exceptions to the rule. Like I have no problem saying like this is what I have an issue with.
Right.
But if she is being 100% honest, then she likes her leadership, she likes where she's at, but she wants to learn how to be motivated. So what's your take on that? What do you think?
Well, I mean, if you go off of, so say she does have good leadership, and I'll say she does, right? And they have their training set up, and they're kind of doing their thing, and they're jumping through their hoops that they need to have, and it may just be the basic, and part of it may just be, um, sometimes you kind of get in that shift of that rut of, this is kind of what we know and this is what we're going to do, instead of kind of looking out, going to a different conference, or seeking, reading different books, things of that nature, where it's just kind of, this is what we're training, that's what we're going to do, kind of deal. I kind of look at it at times, we all kind of have the ebbs and flows, where we're like super motivated. Yeah, here we go. We're gonna get after it. And then you may have a day where we're just like, oh man, like if I can just get through this day, that would be great. But I think for her, it'd just be try not to ride the highs too highs, the lows too lows, and go out of her, the four walls of her department per se, and start, seeking out others, whether it's, small conferences close by, or a fool's chapter, or neighboring departments. If you've got like mutual aid agreements, or like a regional response kind of deal, to where you can kind of just get out a little bit on your own and go do some training somewhere else, because it does get tough. I mean, anymore now, the hours, regardless, that we all have to keep, I mean, shoot, I mean, your day can be packed full of training and you're really not getting a whole lot accomplished.
Right.
Or if you're, in a busy area where you are running, predominantly, like we pulled our numbers, it was like 86% EMS calls last year. And I mean, so that is just, you're constantly running on that box. And so trying to find those avenues of breaking up the monotony a little bit can be kind of tough. So that's where I think you can just kind of step out and, go to a small conference and whatnot, and just kind of see the other side of the world pretty much. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's so funny because when we envision ourselves going out and doing training, and I've been accused of worse, right? uh,
right. Yeah.
but I've been, there are probably a handful of times where I've been the only person out there just racking hose, pulling lines, doing whatever I needed to do to feel like I was accomplishing something.
Right.
And it was kind of one of those things where people started either jumping on board and following, or I just stayed out there by myself. Either way, I was fine with it. But what I figured out really quickly is that it doesn't always have to be, pulling a line off of a in-service rig, or doing a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be very time intensive. I mean, it could be something as simple as when everybody started posting on social media about putting their mask on with their gloves on.
Right.
I'm not a huge fan of it. And it's primarily because I suck at it. I mean, I'll be 100% honest. Like, I mean, it's a great idea if you can do it, and I can do it, but I can't do it as fast as everybody on social media.
Yeah.
And so I did. I spent probably 2 or 3 shifts, a couple hours, trying to put my mask on with my gloves. And after a while, I was just like, okay, if we're going to a fire and it's confirmed, I'm just going to put my mask on and I'll come off the rig with my mask on. Like, that's
Right.
how I do it.
Yeah.
If it's not confirmed, I'll put it on in the front yard. I can take a second to do that. Now, I'm sure Howard Reinwald's going to jump me on that. He he probably has a completely different view, and I've heard it before. We've had that discussion, but that was a very simple task that I could train on myself, and it didn't require me to have all this stuff set aside or have this stuff taken off the rig. So what kind of stuff do you do where it's just you, or maybe just you and one other person?
So we actually, the shift I'm on, we're pretty progressive. I would say we're kind of average. We're the kind of the youngest shift on the department. And so we've got a lot of young guys that are just eager as can be. And as a newly promoted officer, it's been fun to see because I got guys that are like, hey, what's the schedule for the day? Well, this is what we got going on. Okay, cool. At some point, it snowed like 8 inches out, last night. Can we go throw ladders in the snow so we know what it's like to be on a ladder in the snow? And it's like, sure. Yeah, you betcha. Like, we'll make it happen, and so just, like I've done the mask thing too, and I've timed myself, and I tell you, I am way faster without those gloves on.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, well, how can I like try to speed that process of, because I always have them up here on my chest, and unstrap them and put them on. And I got a buddy I work with. He got the little toddler straps.
Oh yeah. The ones that hook onto your wristlet.
Yeah, the heat straps. Oh, and so for me, it's nice because I can toss those on quick, and I know my gloves are always dangling here on my hands already.
Yep.
And so if like I hop out, make a 360, and then the dudes are ready to go out the door, I can throw it on quick, and my gloves are right there. So for me, that's sped that up a little bit. It's just clunky trying to do all that too. But we've got kind of a rickety hose trainer. At some point, we'd like to be able to upgrade it a little bit, make it more mobile. But we have one with some like old, wooden backboards from the 70s that we kind of put together. And we'll pull hose. My battalion chief, he happened to spend a couple days with Aaron Fields. And so that dude has got like, the nozzle forward ingrained in his brain. And so, we do a lot of that. And there was a deal the other day I happened to find. It's something I'd saved on Facebook, and I don't remember where it was at, but like each day had certain thing. Like Mondays was this, Tuesdays was this, and we're going to kind of implement that a little bit, especially with me at Station 1, where I'm primarily at, and start kind of doing something like that. So instead of like trying to guess what to do for the day, it's hey, Mondays we're going to do this. Tuesdays we're going to throw ladders. Wednesdays is search, things of that nature. So that's where I'm kind of fortunate, having that motivated crew. Prior to that, when I was just a line guy, it was just going out and, making sure my stuff's set up, and watching stuff online, finding guys like you, things of that nature where, you can kind of do things here or there where you're not taking things out of service per se. When, hey, I'm going to go throw a ladder, I can pull the truck out and I know I'm throwing that ladder. And if we got to go, then I know I can toss that on really quick kind of deal. So, it's just, it can be tough sometimes when you're doing it by yourself, but eventually people will start watching, wondering, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm out here throwing ladders, or I'm out here pulling hose, or, I'm putting my pack on and things of that nature. And they eventually will get intrigued enough that, you start getting people that'll start trickling in. And then it makes it more fun. I'm fortunate to have some of the guys I've got, because it's not hard to motivate them. I mean, it makes it pretty easy to, here, we're going to do this and this and this, and we're going to spend 30 minutes on it and get it done and out. But yet we kind of know, hey, this is how long the one drill that you had, how long does it take for the water, pull water, and how long does it take till it hit the end of the hose? And then so you kind of have an idea. And so we did that and worked on that a little bit of where, if we could speed that up a little, and we come to find out that it's easier just when I say, hey, I want water, you're already hitting the ground. So then by the time it gets there, because we tried to do it a little bit earlier than that.
That hose load shoots out of your hand.
Hose wrapped around his pack and it lifted him up off the ground. And, he's got the little feet kicking kind of thing. And it's like, oh Lord. So it was like, oh, we better scale that back just a little bit. So,
yeah. But those are things, and you bring that up and I kind of laugh, that was when we were up in Osceola, but I just laugh because you literally sit there and watch these crews, and they're out there, they're everywhere. Right. And we were the same way until we figured this thing out where, we're sitting there and we're putting our mask on, and then it's almost like, hey man, did you call for water? You're like, oh. So now you're yelling for water, and at this point, the driver operator's not paying attention, so they're kind of off doing their thing, and it's like, hey, can we get some water, please? And so, as a crew, when you guys are, I mean, that's music to my ears to hear you guys talk about, hey, their eyes on us until we give them the signal, and then they give us water, and we know that it's going to be 10 seconds before it hits the end of the line. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to say about, you kind of brought it up, and I wanted to touch on it too. From a newly promoted officer, and from a still kind of testing the waters officer. I mean, even after 7.5 years, I'm still kind of,
Yeah.
man, there's still a lot of days that I'm like, man, am I going to get in trouble for this? But for us, it's when I see people that want to train, I can't imagine saying no. If they want to train, we'll train. If they want to go over stuff, we'll go over stuff. If I don't have time because of administrative stuff, I'll either get them hooked up with somebody who will, or we'll find a time next shift that we can.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate enough, kind of like you, my captain, if I say, hey, I want to go train on this, or hey, I want to go look at this, he's cool with it. And it's, but unfortunately at the same time, it's not all rosy, right? Like there's times where I've been like, hey, I want to go pull apartment lays. They're like, dude, Melon, no. Like it sounds cool, but no, we 20 minutes till dinner. We're not going to go pull hose. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Well, and I did a study. I had taken Holloman's command officer kind of class, and one of the deals was to like rewrite an SOP that you had that maybe needed changed or redone or what have you. And so I was like, well, we've got a 12-story. It's 12 to the top. It's 11 floors, but you got 12 to the top, and then on one, and then on the other side of the parking lot that we got a 6-story. So we got a couple of tall buildings along with garden style apartments, things of that nature. And that was my deal, was like, man, if we had something, I've got a captain that, he talks about how like our SOPs we should be able to hand to the brand new guy and say, read this. And then if something happens, you kind of have an idea what we're doing, right? Instead of, here's this generalized, and they look at it and go,
you want me to read all 375 pages?
Right, exactly. And so it was like, well, right now, like our high rise SOP at that time, like if you couldn't give it to a new guy and they would have any clue as to what they were supposed to do, and so I didn't want to make the guys go out, and this is before I was promoted, but I didn't want to make, guys go out and be like, here, we're going to do this. So it was more or less, I've got a 100-foot chunk of rope, or we took a tape measure out. My battalion chief and I went out and we just started measuring buildings and setbacks, and, and where we came up with for the majority, minus the high rise, obviously, is we're pulling the 2.5 off. We're screwing the tip off. We're grabbing our apartment / high rise packs that we have on the side of the truck.
Yep.
And we know it's going to take, all 200 feet of the 2.5 to get to where pretty much where we want to go. And now we're either going to need, 2 lengths, 3 lengths, or 4 lengths. But being able just to go out and do that, and then be able to go and say, okay, here we go. Here's what we come up with, and everybody's like, oh shoot, like, hey, that's cool. Like that's good information to know, and so in those moments, instead of dragging everybody out, here, we're going to go do this. Here's the information, and put that in your card file. So when you finally do get that one call out that garden level apartment, you're not trying to pull the 1 3/4, and then now you're still 200 foot short, So
absolutely.
What does everybody do? We're grabbing the 1 3/4 and we're going, and then it's like, oh shoot, now what do we do?
You make it halfway there and you run out and you're like, oh
yeah, exactly.
So. Yeah. Well, and doing those types of things is beneficial, not just for us, it's beneficial for the whole entire organization, because now it's out there, it's known, if it's done in the right way, don't just go out there and start doing this stuff without talking to someone, unless you're the person that can make those decisions. But in Maddy's case, like you were talking about too, and I thought it was a great talking point, the conferences, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you and I didn't have the opportunities that we have today.
No,
because there was no such thing as a micro conference. Nobody knew what that was.
No.
And so, what are some of the, I mean, she's in West Virginia, we're here in the Midwest. From here to there, I mean, I could probably think of 7 or 8 different conferences off the top of my head.
Mhm.
Where do you look to find those? Where do you go? Do you rely on social media? Do you?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, you kind of that's kind of the nice thing about that is you can kind of look at some of the instructors that you maybe have listened to on podcasts or seen on videos, YouTube, things of that nature, or just shares, and there's the little communities within that you can be kind of a part of. And you just kind of see those kind of pop up, and then you can just kind of research them and look them up. And really, you just kind of look at your area. Okay, so where do I live in retrospect of, Dave Mellon? Well, he's 5 hours from where I live at. Okay, things of that nature. Where if you kind of start paying attention to a little bit of those, where some of these, instructors are at, and things of that nature, then you can kind of help you figure out where they're at, and then, oh, hey, well, shoot, that conference is just right down the road. And so maybe something that's reasonable, you can, hop in your car and go to. So
Yeah. Well, and I grew up always wanting to go to iChiefs and always wanting to go to FDIC and always wanting to go to Firehouse, and those are all achievable things. Like I've made a lot of those, not only as a student but also as an instructor,
mhm,
and it's great. But I also understand how, for a smaller department that doesn't have the funding to be able to send people to those,
yeah,
that's not achievable. And so a lot of these smaller micro conferences, in addition to, it's not just them, but in addition to the larger conferences, um, they have grant programs where you can put in to send people. They have, you know, all these programs to be able to sponsor people. And so I think that's so cool. I've seen, a lot of the stuff that Kyle Ramgus started out doing, where he was sending people to conferences
right.
specifically because they couldn't afford to get there.
Mhm,
And so I think there's just so that culture of micro conferences, in addition to the big every year,
mhm.
has just kind of changed how we do stuff. And I think it's so cool.
Well, and what I think is cool with that too is, you know, you're getting a wide variety of good instructors and good content, and you're getting, I mean, last week's conference with Von Oppen showing up, that was a bucket list weekend for me. I mean, and I mean, and I told him that. I said when he walked in that Friday night, it was just like, holy smokes, like he's
Yeah.
here, and
Be like, oh my gosh, that's Mark.
right. And being able just to say thank you, because I mean, I told him on Saturday morning after class we had him, I said, man, I said, about 4.5, 5 years ago, I was in a real bad spot. And I was ready to kind of just pack it all in and go try to find something else to do. And I happened to listen to a podcast that he was on. And it was just kind of that moment of listening to what he had to say. And it was kind of like, okay, I'm not the only one that feels this way in certain moments. And it was just in a bad rut, but it was just nice to hear somebody say, I've been there before. This is what I did to get out of it. And I can understand, you could just understand the same frustrations, but it was just obviously a different location, but it's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Same exact
Um,
thing.
yeah. And so being able just to say thank you, and it was really cool. And so that's what I think is really neat about some of these smaller micro conferences is you're getting, everybody from the guys that are trying to hit the ground running on the bottom floor to give their message or their training or whatever it is and move it on up to the guys at the pinnacle up top, and they're willing to come out here in the middle of Nebraska where we get 10 inches of snow in 2 different nights, and it's sub below freezing temperatures, and they're willing to still come out and share their message to a small area. And I just thought it's cool. It really is. So and I think it's just a testament to where the fire service is and where it's going.
Sure.
um, because I mean, that sense of community is still there, and I think it's thriving even more because we're all understanding that, you know, even the little guy and the big guy, we're all we all put our, our gear on the same way, so.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I think, with Maddie and her question, and for anybody else that's listening or watching, I mean, we've all been there, and Curtis and I have had these conversations. I can't even tell you how many times I've called him at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and we're on the phone till like 2:45 in the morning, or you call me.
Mhm.
It's like, hey man, what are you doing? Oh, I'm running errands. And then literally I'm sitting in a parking lot for like an hour and a half while we're chit-chatting on the phone.
Right.
um, but we all have those points where we feel unmotivated, or we feel like we want more. And the cool thing is, no matter what you do in the fire service, no matter where you're at, you can, how do I say this? I mean, the world is your oyster. If you want to go to all
Mhm.
these micro conferences, you can find a way,
Mhm.
right? If you want to go to some of the bigger conferences, you can find a way. If you want to listen to the podcasts, they're out there.
Yeah.
And we're new to the podcast game. This is something that I'd never honestly thought I would ever be doing.
Right.
Um, but when we added ourselves to Spotify and iHeartRadio and Apple and all this other stuff, I just, I searched firefighter, and there's all these podcasts that pop up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's cool, man, because you get to hear all these different perspectives that, like I said, 10 or 15 years ago, you and I didn't have the opportunity to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's crazy. And I think, that's where, I mean, technology and social media. And I mean, it's always, anything is good in moderation and whatnot. And then there's the goods and the bads of it. But I think that's the one thing that, the positive out of social media is you can get connected with, a dude clear across the country or even the world for that matter. And be able to have that connection and that, that sound box to be able to, throw ideas or situations or whatnot and be able to talk through those. Whereas, 10, 15 years ago, that was, you had MySpace, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I mean, there's a lot of good that's come out of it, because you can have that connection with people. So.
Yeah. And I just, it's funny that you bring that up. So the other night, I got a message on Facebook from a guy out in Aurora, Colorado, and
Mhm.
he had listened to the OODA Loop podcast.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, man, I got a couple questions. Like, we're trying to incorporate this stuff.
Mhm.
Um, would you be willing to just talk with me for like 5 minutes? And I was like, so I sent him a message back. I was like, hey man, I get off work here in a little bit. I was at my part-time gig. I said, can I give you a shout? He's like, yeah, no problem. So I literally talked to this dude the whole way home, and then sat
Mhm.
in my driveway for like 15 or 20 minutes. And it was a great conversation. He had a lot of questions about how to incorporate the OODA loop and how to use some of the other things that we incorporate to make it even more realistic. And the conversation morphed a little bit, but man, it was like, this guy I'd never talked to. I never met him. I just added him on Facebook when he sent me that message.
Right.
But that's how it works, man. If Maddie reached out and sent us a message, and I haven't sent her a friend request yet, but I'll send her a friend request, and then we'll connect. And then if she needs resources or has questions, she can always send me a message. I'm sure she'll probably send you one too. So, what has been your experience with motivating others? Like, I know you're a super motivated person. I know in your department you guys have a lot of motivated people, but what about the people that you meet at conferences? What about the people around you that come to you and say, hey Curtis, what should I do here? Like, how do you motivate them?
You know, I look, it's been a process for me. Back kind of right out of college and right out of the gate, man, I was like, my hair was on fire and I was going to change the world, and for those that aren't quite motivated, that doesn't get well received. And man, it was, and for me, I was just like, I don't understand this. Like, this, we've got the best job in the world. Like, this is what we're doing. And it was just like, yeah, kid, settle down. Like, here's your inventories. I'm not done with my crossword yet, and just go. And it was really, it was deflating. It was like, man, like, you gotta be kidding me. And it just seemed like the more you push, the more animosity it would cause. And so moving through that period and then growing up, essentially, and just understanding that, you can't come at it 100 miles an hour all the time. And just taking those little opportunities, those little nuggets, just to kind of, just set it out there on the table a little bit and just let it kind of simmer. And so, you get somebody who is just like, hey, so what's your thought behind this? Like, why are we doing this? And try to get it from kind of, I've learned to try to do a better job of get it from their perspective of like, hey, we've got, the guys from Elkhart Brass out here and they're flowing water like crazy, but what's the point of all of this? Like, this doesn't this doesn't make any sense. And it was like, well, the reason why we're doing this is, one, we're figuring out what our hose package is.
Mhm.
Is small departments, it's hard to have a standardized across the board, budgets and things of that nature, and it makes sense and totally understand. But we were able to get some better nozzles, so it was like, well, let's flow some water and kind of really dial in this line, this line, and this line, so then we know at 102 psi we're getting 160 gallons out of the end of that nozzle. Whereas if you kind of use some of the regular just general friction loss stuff, we were over pumping everything.
Right.
Because we were using 95s and putting stuff out, and it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, it's because we were over pumping them. So we were actually getting like 125, 130 out of a 95, but man, it felt like you were just holding on for dear life,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so it was getting that, like, we're going with the low pressure, the high gallonage, and it's like, well, what's the point of all this? Like, I can just take that nozzle and go in and put it out. Well, you're right, but science is showing that you can't sit there and try to match your BTUs anymore. I mean, and if you're going in with that 95, you're not matching. You're going like this, and you're essentially pissing in the wind. It's
Right.
not doing anything.
You're
And so
everybody says that. Oh, you're pissing in the wind. Well, you're actually pissing about 7 feet, and and that's about it.
yeah. And so it was like finally saying, okay, so if you take a 5-gallon bucket, and I heard this analogy the other day at Les Luker, and it was more than, I love it, but it's like, is the analogy, you take that 5-gallon bucket and just dump it on a campfire and poof, it puts it out. Whereas you could drill a hole in the side of that 5-gallon bucket, and that little stream's going out, and it's still 5 gallons, but it's not coming out the same way.
Yeah.
And so trying to just take those opportunities of, if you get that, they ask that question, and not be like, well, how do you not know this? Like, right. And part of it is just because you have individuals that they enjoy their job, they enjoy what they do, but they're not quote unquote into it per se.
Right.
And so trying to build those bridges instead of burning them, and taking those opportunities when they do actually come up to you and say, hey, why are we doing it this way? Or what do you know? What is your thought? And trying to get their perspective on it, and then flip that information to where it makes sense, and it's not, aggressive, and it doesn't make them feel like, I can't believe you don't know this. And just doing it the right way,
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately there's no book for that, and
No.
that's, I mean, really somebody should make a class.
Mm-hmm.
It could be like the modern counterculturist.
I like it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it could be a whole class. But
Yeah.
but that's the thing is, like, you and I had very similar experiences, and I always love when this gets brought up. Dude, we were bulls in a china shop. I mean, it was like, no, we need to do this, 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 and this. And people were like, well, and you're like, no, that's bull crap, or blah, 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 blah. And it was so abrasive, but in our minds, it made so much sense. It was hard to find that connection. And so, now, and I go back to Maddy's question. I mean, how to stay motivated. I mean, Maddy, I got to be honest with you. If you're the one that's going to be out there by yourself training and your crew isn't supportive, you're going to piss people off. Like, it's just going to happen.
Right.
They're going to look at you as the show off. They're going to be like, oh, why is she always out there training? Why is she always out there doing stuff? She's just trying to make us look bad. While they're sitting in the recliner eating their food. It is what it is, but, and she says that she has great leadership, and it sounds like she has the support, but yeah, you and I definitely have had to talk several people off the proverbial ledge, like, hey man, just slow your roll. You're coming in too hot. Like, just slow it down.
Yeah. And it is tough because there's times where, you tell that person, hey, you've got to back pump the brakes a minute, and this is why. And they there's ones that take it well, and there's ones that don't. And the ones that don't, is frustrating, because it's like, I just shake my head. And it's like, man, like I went down that road. You don't want to do that. Like just take a moment and listen to what I'm trying to say. And sometimes you got to learn it the hard way. I mean, that I did. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's just sometimes it's just, those teachable moments in life. And then you just kind of figure out what you're made of and who you are. And then you just, build from that and be humble and graceful, and those ones that say you did cross, go back to them and just say, hey, I'm sorry, I was kind of an ass,
Yeah.
and I'm owning up on that, and we're good to go, and let's make this happen, let's make this work, so.
Yeah, and you and I both have had our fair share of humble pie, and
Mhm.
the two things that I think are the most important, and I tell everybody this in a lot of the classes that I teach, and just in general, like when I'm mentoring people, I'm like, hey, listen, there's two things you need to know: the truth will set you free, and facts are truth. That's as hard as it is to sit there and say people aren't going to like the truth. A lot of people don't like the truth. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that they've been pumping the truck wrong. They don't want to hear that their equipment that they bought wasn't the right stuff. And so, having that humble pie and being like, I'm not saying you did anything wrong. However, here's some food for thought. Those are
Right.
things that you and I have worked on a lot. Um, and the other thing is, and this saying has always driven me nuts, absolutely bonkers. People sit there and say perception is reality. No, reality is reality. That's,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
perception is perception, reality is reality. And I understand the saying, and I understand the meaning of it.
Right.
Um, but I have fought that my entire career. Just because you perceive that Curtis Hensley is doing something doesn't mean that that's what he's doing. So
Right.
if you want to find out what he's actually doing, go talk to him and ask him, and you'll probably get the reality that you're looking for.
Hmm.
So, along those same lines of being the person that has to stay motivated, people are going to look at you differently. People are going to treat you differently. People are going to think you're trying to show them up. Prove to them and show them the facts that you're not.
Right.
And that's one thing that's super, super important. But um,
And on that, be approachable.
yeah,
And that, I mean, because that's where you catch that, that perception's reality. I mean, if you're giving off that aura of you're an ass, and I'm not approachable,
right.
it's and that's where you're gonna stay. That's where, and you may not be. I mean, your inner circle of people, if somebody asks, hey, what would one word you would describe that person, and it's not gonna be, well, that guy's an asshole. I mean,
Right.
it would not be the case per se. But when you're in that moment of, in the where, well, geez, these people, they're kicking up in the recliners, a bunch of, not doing anything, and you've got to stay approachable and just stay humble and really go out there and be like, hey, I'm just better than myself, and if somebody wants to come out and ask a question, great. If not, that's cool too. And just, you do you kind of thing. And but be open to where people can come and be like, yo, so why are you doing this? Well,
Yeah.
this is why. So.
Yeah. And that was actually so a funny story. So the guy is retired now. His name is Larry, and him and I were partners on the ambulance. And Larry was nearing retirement age when I got hired on. So he didn't like me from the get go. Like, we got along, we worked okay together. He would always help where he needed to help, and we did everything that we were supposed to do on a crew. But man, he just, if I went out to go throw ladders, he'd come, he'd come walking right out. He'd be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Like, I'm throwing ladders. Well, that's dumb. Why are you out here doing that? And I'm like, I don't know, so I can be better. And he's like, well, that's stupid, and he'd walk back inside. About 5 minutes later, I'd see him stick his head around the corner. And then about 5 minutes after that, I'd see him stick his head through the window blinds. Then about 5 minutes later, he's standing there with his helmet on, kind of out in the parking lot, just watching me. And about
Yeah.
5 minutes after that, he's walking over and picking up a ladder. And it was so cool to watch him just, uh,
Yeah.
you know, he was super standoffish, and he was one of those very not approachable type of guys. But I learned how to deal with him, and I just said, hey, I'm not even going to try and engage him. I'm just going to, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing it for myself. I'm not asking you to join me. I'm just doing this. If we catch a run and I don't come inside in a couple minutes, just yell at me, you know.
Right.
But he did. He joined in almost every single time. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
and now he's retired and he gets to do whatever he wants with his retired time.
Mhm. It's probably got like a luscious like growth beard going, you know, just all those years of having to shave, and now he's just like, yeah, here we go.
Yeah, you know, well, and I will say this. So he was always like super against the Keurig. We had one in our firehouse, and he was like, "Oh, you know, those are so dumb." And so I heard from somebody the other day that he just bought one. And I'm like, really, man? Like, you're gonna sit there and knock it when you're on the job, and then you retire, and you're like, "Oh, this Keurig is the best thing ever." So
Super handy. I just make, you know, 2 cups and we're good to go.
yeah, but I truly miss him, man. I really do. And you know, he's doing other stuff, and I'm happy for him, and he gets to spend time with his family, and that's great. But yeah, he, you know, as far as staying motivated, he was a tough cookie to crack,
Yeah.
you know, hard nut to crack. And so, you know, I think the biggest takeaway for Maddy, and then I have one other question for you. So the biggest takeaway for Maddy is, you know, to stay motivated, you kind of have to find what motivates you, and you have to. And there's so many different things out there. There are so many different things. If it's just watching listening to a podcast, watching a video, going to a fire conference, you know, going out and training by yourself.
Mhm.
But my question to you is, uh, what is the one thing that can knock motivation completely out the window, faster than you can build it? Because I know I have my own personal thing that will just knock my motivation out. Like if somebody does something, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to take today off. I don't even care.
Oh man, I just that I for me, I mean, it's I don't know. I guess for me, I'm one of those ones where I'm used to just getting after it regardless. And I don't know if that's just, I mean, I coach youth sports a lot, so I don't know if that's just kind of you know, you're gonna have those bad eggs, man. You're gonna have them where they just grind on you like no other, and you can just hang a left, and I'm gonna keep going. I'm just gonna keep going. You either can come with me, or you don't, which is fine either way. But at least I know where I stand. Because at the end of the day, when you're in the middle of it all, you know, I at least know I can count on you, not so much, and I'm gonna keep an eye on you while we're doing our thing. And I mean, just, you know, kind of a piss poor attitude, and it can kind of make you feel just like, oh man, like, here I am trying to do something, and now you're kind of, you know, pissing in your Cheerios kind of thing. But I think, you know, for me, I'm one, I can just keep going. So,
Yeah.
and I've been that way, I guess. So,
So I am not like you. There, um, man, I'll be honest. I mean, there are days where I am completely unmotivated, and a lot of it comes down to poor attitudes. And man, if I'm out there and people are just riding on me and just,
mhm,
if they're pointing it out and trying to make me feel small for what I'm trying to do,
yeah,
I can deal with it for a little while, but then it starts to get hard. And one of the things that I've done, and I started doing this about 7 or 8 years ago. I
mhm,
have a couple different things either on me or around me. So, like up in my locker, my gear locker, I have a puck tag for Mark Weiss.
mhm,
And, you know, I have a lot of different things for different people. Brad Clark, you know,
mhm,
and on the back of my helmet band, it says send it, you know, so I can always remember him that way. And so it's those little reminders that, you know, yeah, I get pissed off and I toss my helmet down in the grass and I'm like, man, this is BS. And then I
mhm,
look over and see that send it and I'm like, I go pick up my helmet. I go back to work. There's times where I've gotten pissed off and I've walked out in the bay and I've got my coffee cup and I look at my locker and I see, you know, Mark Weiss's thing up on my locker.
mhm,
And it's like, you know what, this is still the best job in the world. And so finding those little things that motivate you and finding those ways to put them in places that you don't necessarily look at every single day, but when you
mhm.
need them, they just pop out.
Yep.
And I've heard of people putting stuff in their lockers. So when they open up their locker, it just kind of, it's right there in their
Mhm,
face.
mhm,
Um, but that has made a huge impact on me just for those times
mhm.
where you just really need it.
Yep. Well, that's what we put up. One of our department goals a couple of years ago was to put the mission statement up somewhere, which I was like, I'm on board with that. Let's do this. And I'm kind of a computers nerd a little bit with design and whatnot. So hopped on, put something together, sent it up, and was like, shoot, let's do it. And on there, like I said, when I was in that bad spot, Von Oppen and his fully involved really spoke to me in that moment, and it still does to this day. I mean, I've got the sticker on my helmet. This weekend, I was able to get a keychain and a challenge coin he gave me, and I threw that keychain right on my work keys. I mean, so that is in my pocket at all times. But we put the big 4 symbol on our mission statement banner, and then below it, excellence is my responsibility. And so it's nice because at any station, the 3 we've got, you walk in the bay and boom, there it is right on the wall. And so it is nice to have those, just those gentle reminders of, I'm kind of having a rough day today, but hey, you know what? There it is. Like I'm here for them. I'm not here for myself. And we got the best job in the world. I mean, hands down, no bones about it. It's good. It's good to go to work. I mean, it's good to have your time off and be able to be at work and be at work and be at home and be at home with your family. But I don't know about you, but there's days where it's like, man, is it time to go back to work?
Yep. Pretty much all of COVID.
Oh, dude.
COVID.
It was one of those, yeah, your kids are going home for spring break and you're going to keep them for the next 6 months, which is what it is. And it's, we didn't know what was going on and now we do. And but that was the one thing like I was proud of all 4 of mine. Right now they range from 15 to age 3, but and I tell you, these kids, they're some resilient little boogers. I mean, they just they put a lot of adults to shame, all of them so far. I mean, they're just like, whatever, if this is what we got to do to get things happening, then we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And,
well, and for those of you who haven't heard this before, my wife's a first grade teacher. And so at the beginning of COVID, I'm freaking out because of the medical aspect of it. It's like, this is outbreak. This is actually happening. This is real. Right. And then, she was like, man, you're really freaking out about this. And then it wasn't until she had to do remote learning that she had her freak out.
Right.
But yeah, you're right, man. Our kids were just like, got to do virtual stuff. All right, whatever. Like they could have cared less.
Oh, dude. My 7-year-old, she was 6 at the time, so she was kindergarten, and she loves school. She just loves it. And I mean, getting that plug pulled, I mean, it was like, what is happening? Yeah. And it was about a week after they'd been home, she came in like one morning and she's like, all right, here's the deal. From 8 a.m. to 8:15, I do this. From 8:15 to 8:45, this is what we did. So we just sat down and we put our schedule out. And so every day she knew, and I took all her papers, stapled them together. Here's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And she treated it like it was a regular school day.
Dude, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So it was cool to see because she was super motivated in that moment of like, I'm trying to keep something of somewhat normal. This is what I can control. And this is what we're going to do, and that first Zoom meeting with her class was pretty tough for her though. Yeah. He had to sign off, but it was just like, hey, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. We're going to get through this. And we're, us coming from the field we're in, we're used to that. I mean, the proverbial shit's hitting the fan and it's like, okay, like we're stay calm. We'll figure it out. It's going to be okay. But yeah, it was wild.
I always tell my kids, I'm like, is anything on fire? No. Is anyone bleeding? No. Is everyone breathing? Yes. Okay, then there's nothing to freak out about. And so very early on, my kids are like, Dad, is anybody? I'm like, don't you say that to me. Don't you say that to me. That's my line. Like, yes, there are people that can't breathe, as a matter of fact.
Right. This is true. It does happen. Oh man.
Oh, but no, like I said, man, it's I think it's all good stuff. I know you're really dialed in from the day that we met. It was kind of one of those things where I knew we were going to end up being friends for a long time.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and I think with Maddie's question, it is like I said, she's not alone, and there are so
No.
many people watching or listening to this that are like, yep, been there, done that.
Yeah.
Um, so,
I think first you just got to find a buddy,
yeah,
find somebody, and that's where whether it's through social media or getting to a conference. I mean, man, we like, yeah, taking that class with you that first time, I was like, yeah, this guy's a good egg. Like this, I like this. And having that connection and being able to have a few of those in that circle of, it may not be somebody you work with, which is okay.
yeah,
It's good to have a different perspective and a different set of eyes and ears and somebody that, yeah, that you can bounce something off that's not in your local area. Because maybe you're just, maybe you're just missing something. And be able to get that different perspective. So
yeah. And a lot of times those people can fill the void of what you're not getting, and I'm not saying anything specifically about her department because I don't even know what department she's on, but there are times where I wasn't getting what I needed.
mhm.
And so, going to a Fools chapter, getting involved with the Fools, sitting down and talking to, I think at one point we had, God, like 18 different guys from 7 or 8 different departments. And so it was cool to like sit down and be like, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that's dealing with this.
Right.
And whether that's going out and training or sitting around drinking a beer,
Mhm.
you get that kind of void filled that you wouldn't get if you were just
Right.
staying inside those 4 walls, which, you kind of touched on earlier. So
Yeah. Yep.
that's good. All right. Well, Curtis, I can't thank you enough for joining us. I guarantee you'll be back. You're teaching with us now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be
Yeah.
fun, man. I think we got some classes coming up. We're going to be down at Labette Community College here in Kansas. We got Revolutionary Fire Tactics at the lake coming up this summer. We're going to be traveling back in August, hopefully, for FDIC. So, a lot of different conferences, a lot of different stuff going on. It's going to be a good time. I think 2021 might be kind of looking up after the thaw.
Right. Yeah. No doubt. Right.
As I'm sitting in my basement, that's like literally
No.
55 degrees in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, thanks again, man. Maddy, thank
You
you
bet.
for sending your question in. For everybody listening, I say this all the time. I can't make this stuff up. Continue to send stuff. We're backlogged. I think I got 40 or 50 questions that I am still kind of picking through. We're going to get to all of them, but continue to send stuff in. But anyway, until we talk to you guys again, take care, be safe. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye.